Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Salty, Cheesy, Herby, Crispy, Snackable Bakes. On each episode, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. Joining me today from across the pond is Melanie Johnson, recipe developer and author of the cookbook Bundt, From Everyday Bakes to Fabulous Celebration Cakes. Melanie is also a food writer at Country Life magazine, and she's been writing the Kitchen Garden Cook column for over a decade. Melanie is an expert when it comes to baking with a bundt pan, and she's been enjoying bundt cakes since she was little, and joins me to talk all about them, including how great they are for beginner bakers and how the bundt is the cake that styles itself. I love that. We chat about her early baking memories with her maternal grandmother in an orange grove in Australia, no less, about the best way to grease a bundt pan, and about how baking can keep you sane during the toughest of times. She also walks me through her easiest chocolate and vanilla marble bundt with milk chocolate glaze recipe. You don't want to miss this combo, so stay tuned. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.com. Today's episode is presented by Nordicware. Nordicware is a brand that every baker needs to know about. Their origin story is the stuff of legend. The brand was founded by husband and wife Dave and Dottie Dalquist in Minnesota. Today, Nordicware products are still proudly made in America and considered absolute essentials in commercial and home kitchens, including my own. And the company remains family-owned. Nordicware is famous for a lot of things, but especially their bundt pans. If you're a regular listener of our show, you know that a bundt is a tube-shaped cake. Nordicware continues to elevate the art of baking, offering the very best for those who take their craft seriously. Nordicware has classic bundt pans, braided, fluted, minis, wreath-shaped, star-shaped, and even fleur-de-lis. You have to head to nordicware.com to see all the options. You don't have to hunt for the perfect bundt. It's all right there. Everything is crafted from high-quality cast aluminum to ensure even heating for the most consistent results. Nordicware pans are built for precise baking and easy release, which means a golden brown, evenly baked exterior and crisp design detail to capture all those gorgeous glazes and ganaches you're going to be drizzling over your bundt cakes. Peeps, one more thing. Nordicware is giving She's My Cherry Pie listeners 15% off any order at nordicware.com. Just use the code CherryBomb15 at checkout. That's CherryBomb15. Let's chat with today's guest. Melanie, so excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to talk marble bundt cake with milk chocolate glaze and so much more.
Well, I am so excited to be here, Jessie. It is just the most exciting. I'm a huge fan of all things Cherry Bombe.
Oh, yay.
I am honored to be here.
You were born in Australia, but you grew up in the Austrian mountains and the British countryside, which just sounds so romantic and idyllic. And I've read about a couple of really perfect little early baking memories and baked good memories that I would love to unpack with you. Will you tell us about baking with your maternal grandmother or adjacent to your maternal grandmother? I think you were in an orange grove in Australia. And she was probably in the kitchen.
Oh, well, my grandmother, she had the most amazing orange grove at her home. And she was a huge, huge baker. She just loved cooking. We never actually fully appreciated just what an incredible professionally trained chef she really was. So she absolutely is my inspiration. And just seeing everything that she used to make, it was sensational. And I just didn't even appreciate it at the time. But looking back, reflecting on everything she did, she was amazing. One of the things that she made constantly was her marble cake. It was a constant in her kitchen. You always knew that it was there.
And was there also like a moment where she would be making something in her kitchen and then she would like mise out all the ingredients for you in little bowls in the orange grove? And
totally.
And you could kind of combine them to make your own version of the cake?
She was so sweet. So obviously being Australia, so the weather is beautiful. So she would set up a table for me and my sister, and she would give us all the ingredients, and she'd have them all there for us. Anything we wanted, we could just put it all into a bowl and mix it up and really have fun with it. So we would go outside, and of course we would do that. I mean, you can imagine the mess we must have been making with cocoa powder flying everywhere and all this, but it was outside, so no one really minded. And then we would take our creations into the kitchen, and then she would bake them for us. And then afterwards, she would produce them on the table, and she would have her beautiful bundt cake sitting there, and we would have our beautiful cake sitting on the table. And of course, she was always so gracious, and she'd always say, "Oh my goodness, look at your cake. It's amazing." And so then it built in this huge pride. And I would actually believe her. And I really would think my cake was amazing. I mean, to this day, I still kind of think maybe my cakes were quite good.
Your sister might disagree.
Yeah, exactly. I think everyone else might be like, "Oh my God, these cakes, they're
Right.
terrible."
Oh, I love that story so much. So your parents were in hospitality, or at least they ran an inn. Tell us about visiting the pastry kitchens of your parents' inn in Austria.
Yes. It was a really lovely hotel. And at the back of the hotel, of course, they had the kitchens. And there was an amazing pastry chef with a huge marble table at the back. I remember my father always used to take me out. So he would go and have a wander around the kitchens together and would be walking around, looking at all the savory food. And I'd be holding his hand and looking at everything going on. And I wasn't particularly, like, even though I am a chef that cooks everything, I wasn't as drawn naturally to the savory food. But by the time we got to the back and we would see this amazing pastry chef, and he'd be wearing his chef's whites in this beautiful chilled marble island. And then he would have all the ingredients out, and he'd be making all of the Austrian Christmas cookies. He'd be making the Kipfel cookies with the hazelnut flour and all these different things. And so it just gave me such a massive insight into what being a pastry chef would be like. And I loved it. I was hooked straight away. It was just something I already knew that I had a natural affinity to, that I wanted to do. But my parents weren't actually that keen on me doing it.
They didn't love that idea.
They didn't love the idea. They were like, why do you want to be a pastry chef? Why do you want to do that? And so then I didn't actually fully chase my pastry chef dreams until after I'd worked in art. But it was just a natural progression. I was always going to end up being back in pastry. It was inevitable.
It sounds like your dad was a little bit more, I'm not a crazy fan of this term, but a little bit more of a foodie than your mom. I read that sort of your mom was into the quality and the finest things. I wanted to know about your dad's souffle omelets, because there's something about that sounds so delicious to me. And I also wanted to know about sort of, even though she wasn't a chef, the way that your mom sort of inspired your eventual cooking and baking career.
Well, my dad, when he was very young, he actually worked as a baker himself. And he didn't do it for that long. But you can talk to him now and he'll say things about, "Oh no, the brioche dough has to be done like this," or something. And he's got this amazing insight just from that short time that he worked as a baker. And when I was growing up, you couldn't make anything without him interfering. If I made a cake or I made something, he'd be in the kitchen saying, "No, no, 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 you haven't quite done that right. You're going to have to do this." And, slightly take over, but he doesn't take over anymore, thank goodness.
Good.
But his signature dish would have been his souffle omelette. And we ate a lot of those when I was growing up. It was just a very simple omelette, really, but with the eggs really whipped up, with the whites whipped up and then folded through. So it would make this delicious, massive, puffy omelette that we would all then share, sort of a family size omelette. But it was delicious.
Oh my gosh.
Simple, but delicious.
Sounds so yummy. And what about your mom? What would she have? What do you feel like you learned from her, she taught you, or how she influenced you?
So when I was growing up, we had a really beautiful kitchen garden, and my mum was in charge of that. So she was very into how everything was growing and making sure that we had all of the right ingredients to be healthy. And just to sort of the other side of things, she was more into the health of everything and the vegetables. And we had a beautiful berry cage, and we had, raspberries and tayberries and blackberries, everything growing. And that was in England, in the country. She was very involved in that. But she was very natural. She was probably more like, I don't know if you know this, but in England, there's a restaurant called the River Cafe.
Oh, of course.
And, and they're famous for they just love letting the actual ingredients sing. And I would say my mum was more that sort of a style of chef. Like, she was into making delicious family food that was very healthy and really focused on really good ingredients. So I think I definitely took that on.
There was a bakery in Austria when you were little where you would eat these incredible donuts. I feel like it's an early baking or baked good memory for you. Maybe stuffed with apricot jam and covered in icing sugar, pillowy dough. Tell us about those.
So there's a bakery. It's in this village where I grew up. It's called Kitzbühel. And these donuts were absolutely sensational. They're called Krapfen in Austrian. And they were the most pillowy, soft, light as a feather donuts. I've never, ever tasted another one like them. And they were just so soft. You can't even describe them. And what they would do is they had a little bit of rum in with the apricot jam. And so that's really gave the flavor to the entire thing. But I've actually been doing research and I am determined to make those donuts. So I've been really researching exactly what they could have been doing to get them to that really ultra soft, pillowy state. Think I may have found it. I have to keep that to myself
Okay.
because I think that might be in my next book.
Nice. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Carrie Diamond, host of Radio Cherry Bombe. We're teaming up with the Visa Dining Collection by Open Table and Visa to present the Summer Tastemaker Tour, a 4-city dining series that celebrates food, drink, culture, and the incredible women redefining today's culinary landscape, and it is exclusive to those with eligible Visa credit cards. Next up on our Summer Tastemaker Tour is Austin, Texas. We're headed to the gorgeous Commodore Perry Estate on Friday, June 27th for an afternoon of great food, connection, and conversation. We'll be joined by special guests Sarah Hurd, Tracy Malachek Ezekiel, Amanda Turner, and Ale Corey, some of the most exciting culinary talents in Texas right now. As always, there'll be delicious bites, a panel chat, and plenty of time to connect with fellow Bomb Squad members. Access is available for those with eligible Visa credit cards. Terms and conditions apply. Visit cherrybomb.com for tickets and to learn more. We'd love to see you this summer in Austin.
Cherry Bombe's new issue, The Power Issue, is out now, and this issue has 4 incredible cover stars. Activist and author Gloria Steinem, Chef Mashama Bailey of The Gray in Savannah, Chef Restaurateurs Jody Williams and Rita Sodi of Via Carota and Bar Pistolino in New York City, and chef and culinary creative Sophia Rowe. The issue includes exclusive interviews with all of the cover stars, plus our first ever Power List of the 100-plus women making the culinary world a more interesting, inspiring, and innovative place. You don't want to miss this edition of Cherry Bombe magazine. To get your copy, head to cherrybombe.com or stop by your local culinary shop or bookstore. You can find a full list of retailers on cherrybombe.com. Now back to our guest. I know that you started baking professionally later in life, and, first there was the pursuit in art history, but I just wondered if when you were a little kid, was it mostly just sort of enjoying baked goods that you ate, or were you actually baking at all? Were you watching any food TV? I know on your website I see Martha Stewart and Mary Berry and Donna Hay. Were cookbooks a big deal for you? Any of that going on when you were little, or not until later?
No, I was always obsessed with food. It was just in me. I just couldn't get away from it. And also because I had such a foodie family, we would always go searching for the best things. So we would hear about something amazing, and then my dad would be, oh no, we've got to go there because they have the most amazing cakes you've ever seen. Or in London, there's another, it was more popular back then, but there's this cafe called Patisserie Valerie. And at the time, they were amazing. They had the best croissants in London. And so my dad would always be like, oh, we have to go there. We're going to have to go and get a croissant. And I did. I cooked a lot. I used to love making bread and everything. I used to do cakes and just everything. I always enjoyed cooking.
But despite all of that, despite your foodie family, et cetera, and your exposure to food via your parents' inn, you did pursue art history. You lived in Ireland. You had a beautiful kitchen garden. And sort of that garden was always inspiring, I think, you to bake and cook and maybe help to make that transition for you from art to baking and food?
Yes, 100%. So once I'd had my daughter and I was living in Ireland, we had such a beautiful kitchen garden and we grew everything there. So then I had all these amazing vegetables coming up to the house. And so you just couldn't help but fall in love with all of the ingredients. And so then I would start looking at these ingredients, and it was so inspiring because I'd be looking at them and thinking, okay, what am I going to do with those? Well, how am I going to make them the most delicious feast that I can possibly create out of these specific ingredients. So then that really was what got me actually trying to make different new things on my own, because I didn't actually want to follow someone else's recipes. I wanted to make my own things because I was relying on what I had right there. It was a time of exploring food, and that's what reignited my love for it.
And then you went to the Leith School of Cookery, and we had Prue as a guest on the show. She is so incredible. I love her so much. What inspired you to go to cooking school? What did you feel like you needed to learn?
So I just felt like I really needed to join all the dots. So even though I was entirely self-taught and I'd had all the influence from when I was younger and my grandmother, who was such a great chef, and then seeing the pastry chef in my parents' hotel. So seeing all of those things, I had such a piecemeal knowledge, but I needed to bring it all together to make it one coherent library of information in my head. And so it wasn't really until I actually went to Leith's that I was able to piece it all together properly. It's a depth of knowledge that you don't really get otherwise, I didn't find. So it's just understanding things that, like a custard base is also a base for for ice cream, or it's just understanding how all of those things work in together. But it was so inspiring and so helpful, gave me such a different viewpoint on food.
So you're a food writer now for Country Life. I love the name of your column, The Kitchen Garden Cook. Did you come up with the name of the column?
Oh, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but no, I didn't.
Oh, but it's so perfect for you. Just because of your
it's such a
history with
nice
your mother's
name.
kitchen garden and your own in Ireland.
Exactly.
I love the name. So tell us a little bit about Country Life for those who don't know, and then tell us a little bit about the column.
Well, Country Life is a very British magazine. It's a wonderful magazine because it has so much interesting content. It's not just about food, it's about everything to do with the British countryside. So it's got beautiful homes and properties, as well as small details. They can chat about something, an issue that's in the country, or it will talk about sheep or chickens, or it will have special features on gardening, or it's a really lovely, all-encompassing magazine. And what makes it also so unique is that both men and women love it. I can enjoy it. My grandmother could enjoy it, but equally I could find my daughter flicking through and looking at something as well. So it really crosses all the age barriers. It's a very unique magazine, and it's been around for a long time.
Can you tell us about the column?
Absolutely. So I've been writing my column for 12 years now. I took a year off in the middle, but yeah, it's been 12 years. So every week I take a seasonal ingredient and I will develop recipes around that ingredient. And then I style the shot, style the food, and take a photograph. So the whole page is created by me from start to finish. So it's a really lovely creative outlet.
Is it digital as well as in print?
Digital as well as in print,
Oh,
yes.
so nice.
You can see all my recipes from the last 12 years on there. But it's quite funny because when I sometimes look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, they've got photographs that I took 12 years ago, and I'm not quite as proud of those ones.
Right, I can relate. So I also learned from your website that you are a breast cancer survivor, and I am as well. And there's a long article on your website that's fascinating. I hope people will go and find it and read it, about your experience and how baking helped you get through it. But oh my gosh, you were writing the column. You just had a little girl. You were newly divorced. There was so much going on when you were diagnosed. And were you also writing the book?
Well, the book luckily came slightly after. That
Okay,
was
good.
more when I was recovering.
Oh, good.
But
you had a full plate.
But I mean, as you will know yourself, it takes a lot longer to recover than you
I know.
think. You finish the treatment, your hair starts growing back, and then you start thinking, oh, I'm fine now.
Yeah.
And then it does take a long time after that. It takes, I think, at least a couple of years to really feel yourself again.
Yes, agree.
So, but I'd really found, so when I was doing chemo, I found it really tough to find joy in anything because nothing material can make you happy. Nothing, it's just difficult to find pleasure in anything. And so I found flowers. They really made me feel happy. And then the other thing was actually baking but it wasn't cooking as in making savory dishes. It was really, this is why I wrote the book about Bundts, was because what I loved was you could take just an array of ingredients, a little bit like when I was cooking in my grandmother's orange grove. You take a bunch of ingredients, you put them together, you pour them into a Bundt tin, And suddenly, even an ordinary vanilla sponge cake, you can just then turn it out and you have the most beautiful bundt cake that will just be such a joy to have and to share it with people that you love. And for me at that time, that was more important than anything. That was everything to me. And so that was why I just suddenly thought, I have to write a book about bunts.
Yeah. I didn't work during chemo, but when chemo ended, I went back to my bakery job, and I just found it so distracting in the best way to just be at work and making sweets and being in, like, I always loved, like, the decorators part of the kitchen where, like, all of the sprinkles are, and I was just like, everything was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need right now.
Totally.
Right?
It's something really simple,
Yeah.
but so honest.
Yes.
It was everything.
We're going to talk about the cookbook. It's called Bundt, 120 recipes for every occasion. And I love that you write the Bundts, they're cakes that style themselves. What is a cake that styles itself?
Well, they're just so beautiful. They're so sculptural and stunning that literally you can take what could be just a very boring cake in a regular round tin, and all you have to do is pour it into a bundt tin instead. And suddenly you've got this sculptural beauty that looks like you've spent hours and hours. And literally you can just dust some icing sugar on top and you've got a creation. I mean, especially for people that aren't massively into cooking, I think it's such a beautiful way of creating something that you can be so proud to share.
Do you really feel like sort of any layer cake you were going to make or any sheet cake you were going to make, that batter should be able to work in a Bundt pan?
It does depend. It's not, I wouldn't say 100% across the
Right.
board, but for most pound cake based cakes, they will work in a bundt tin.
Yeah.
And equally, all of the cakes in my book, they will also all work in like a loaf tin. If you
Yeah.
just want to cook them in a loaf pan, that will also work. But
Yeah.
they're not going to be as beautiful.
Right. And I
So-
also love that you say that because a Bundt pan has a hole, you never have to worry about a Bundt cake sinking.
Exactly. You're never going to have a big dipped cake because it's already got a hole.
And you also say the Bundts are also perfect for beginners. And I just added a note, if you can get them out of the pan, because that's an art in and of itself that we're going to talk about. I think that's what scares people. As you said sort of earlier in our conversation, you grew up with Bundts. Like Bundts were sort of part of your childhood just because of your grandmother, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She would always have one in her kitchen. And then it was so then when she wasn't around anymore, and in Austria, I would always go in, and any sort of coffee shop would always have a cake stand right by the counter, and there'd be a beautiful bundt cake, big marbled cake in there. And I would just always think of her,
Yeah.
just always look at that and go, oh, that's exactly what my grandmother would make. And food is memory, isn't it?
Yeah,
Food
it
brings
is.
so much memory and tradition and family and what's passed down. It's such a simple concept, but from my grandmother to me, and now I'm making them for my daughter, and I'm sure that my daughter will make them for her children too. So it just shows that path.
Nordic ware plays a role in your book because you're using Nordic ware Bundt pans. Did you approach them when you were writing the book? Doesn't sound like they asked you to write the book because you already had the idea, but how did that collaboration happen?
So Nordic ware in the UK is run by this really lovely woman called Pauline. And because I'm on Instagram, Pauline would just send me different tins as gifts so that I would use them for Instagram. And so then she was sending me all sorts of tins, and they would arrive and I'd be like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Look at this beautiful tin that I've been sent. And so then I would use them. And then as I was slowly progressing, then when I had cancer and I was making my bundt cakes, and then suddenly I just started looking and thinking, oh, I really want to write a book on bunts. And then I just thought, well, if I'm writing a book on bunts, I'm going to ask Nordic ware to send me even more tins so that I can use them. And so then it just sort of started that way. So I actually then said to them, oh, I'm actually thinking of writing a book about bunts. Will you send me some more tins? And then they were like, of course we will. Of course we will. I don't actually know how the conversation even came about, but then we were like, yes, we'll just collaborate. So then
So great.
I put them in touch with the publisher, and it just all sort of happened.
That's so great. And did that help in it having its U.S. release, the Nordic ware connection?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nordic ware sell the book on their website and in their shop, which has got to be a good thing.
Yes.
But also, I think what's slightly frustrating for me is that having always grown up with these cakes, in England, you do get a lot of people that go, what's a bundt? What is a bundt? And I'm like, it's a cake with a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in America, most people know what a bundt
Everybody.
cake is.
Yep. I wanted to share some of your Bundt cake tips before we dive into the recipe. You know, the first and most important is you really do have to grease your pan well, and you have to let the cake sit in the pan for 10 minutes after you bake it. I think people run into trouble if they try to release too early or they try to release too late.
I agree.
I was going to ask you if you ever use this thing that many of us call goop, and then I found a recipe for it at the end of the book, which is basically combining flour and oil and shortening and sort of making your own homemade cake release. Do you use that frequently, or is that something, I think I read that you use it when you sort of run out of a cake release spray, or does Melanie always have a jar of goop, as we call it, sitting on the counter?
I do have a jar of goop, and there's nothing quite like it. It is the most reliable release for a Bundt cake, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, no, I love it too.
I just love it. It just makes life so much easier. It really solves all problems. And then every so often, I will make a cake, and I have to confess, sometimes they won't come out.
Yeah.
And there is nothing more defeating than
know.
that moment when you have put all your ingredients and love into your Bundt tin,
I know.
and then you turn it out and it doesn't work. But at the same time, it's almost what makes them so special. So then when they do come out and they're perfect, it's just even more of a joy.
Yes.
But I don't have that many fails with them. It's normally if I've done something stupid, like I've run out of goop and I've run out of spray and I've done something ridiculous.
Yep, I understand.
It's normally my fault.
I understand.
Pilot error.
But if we're not using goop, and we'll talk about this in this recipe, you're greasing or you're brushing with melted butter, and then you're using either all-purpose flour or cocoa powder.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it also depends. So if you have a recipe which is like a marbled cake, then they're quite reliable because it doesn't have, there's no fruit in there. There's nothing, it's quite a sturdy pound cake style. So I find they are the most reliable.
In terms of getting them out of the pan.
Exactly.
Yep.
And chocolate cakes. I find chocolate cakes always come out really easily.
Yeah. I did a lemon Bundt recently and had some problems. And I was very sad. But I think it was because I greased the pan. And then I have this technique where you grease and then you sprinkle with granulated sugar. And then it gives the Bundt like a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of crunch. And what I did is, even though my own recipe says to do this right before you fill the Bundt with the batter, I did it in the beginning of the process and just let it sit. So it kind of, the sugar melted, the spray kind of ran down the bottom of the pan. So I still think it's a great technique, but it didn't work out. Goop is 100% reliable. And I think you make your goop in a bullet blender. Did I read that?
Exactly. Yes. I find the bullet blender really makes it so super smooth that it just creates such a good barrier between the batter and the tin itself.
I love it. All right, so let's talk about the easiest chocolate and vanilla marble Bundt with milk chocolate glaze. So it's a classic Bundt that you grew up with in Austria. Your grandmother, and I'm probably going to mess up the name, so you'll have to tell me, but your grandmother called it a Kugelhupf?
Yes.
Yes?
A Kugelhupf,
Good.
exactly.
And yours has her same buttery swirls of vanilla and chocolate, and you serve it any time of day, whether breakfast, afternoon tea, evening. So first things first, we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and we're going to prep our pan. We could use our goop, which again, the recipe is in Melanie's book, which is great. Or what the recipe calls for is we're going to melt some butter. We're going to use a pastry brush to brush evenly inside our 10-cup Bundt pan. And we're going to be very careful to get into every nook and cranny. And I loved this tip. We're going to brush from the base up to prevent the butter pooling, which I think is exactly what happened when I greased my pan and put the sugar in. All the grease, all the cooking spray just pooled in the bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that causes problems.
Yep, it definitely.
And even when you're using the release spray, use it just before. Don't spray it on before you do anything, because otherwise then it's
pools.
Yep.
And I just wondered, this is a 10-cup Bundt pan, but do you have a favorite shape?
Do you know, it's so hard because it depends on which cake I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, one of my favorite discoveries was actually making panna cotta in a Bundt tin.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you make panna cotta and then you turn it out, it just looks so beautiful. And I've never had an issue with making a jelly, an ice cream, or a creme caramel or a panna cotta release from a Bundt tin.
That's incredible.
So if that's your worry and you have a Bundt tin, then that's definitely one of the recipes you
should
try.
make. So now we're going to sift some cocoa powder. And I wondered, is it Dutch processed cocoa powder or natural cocoa powder, or it just doesn't matter?
It doesn't really matter, but we don't. So in the US, you've got that really lovely, deep, dark, rich, sort of the Matilda chocolate cake level of cocoa. But we don't have that. We don't have the Dutch We just
Processed?
have a different, yes, we just
Okay.
have a different one.
So we're going to sift cocoa powder over the inside of the pan, moving the pan from side to side to coat it evenly, and then we'll turn it upside down to give it a final tap to remove any excess. I usually do that over the sink. Do you do that over the sink, or are you trying to save the cocoa powder and you do it over
Oh,
parchment
no,
or
no,
something?
I absolutely do it over the sink too.
Yeah, over the sink, and then we'll set it
Save the
aside.
mess.
Yeah. Okay, so now in a small bowl, we're going to bloom the cocoa powder and the boiling water together. What kind of bowl should I picture that we're using to do this?
Well, if I was advising what to use, I would say that, use a lovely small bowl. But in practice, because I have literally my kettle is below my mug cupboard, I always do this in a mug. I just mix my boiling water and the cocoa powder in a mug, give a little whisk, and then set it down.
I love that. And tell us why you do that. Why are you combining the hot water and the cocoa?
Well, what I find is that if you add cocoa specifically for something like this, where you're just going to split the batter and then you're going to add cocoa to one part, but then not cocoa to the other, to balance out the batters, because cocoa is quite drying, you need to add the water to the cocoa in order for it to not only incorporate, but also so that it won't suck moisture from that portion of the batter. So it just, I think, helps keep it more moist.
That makes a lot of sense. I also think that there is something about the reaction of the hot water and the cocoa that kind of blooms the flavor. So it's also like a little bit more of a poppy chocolate flavor when you do something like this.
Yes, and it definitely smells really delicious as you're doing it.
And that's important.
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to add softened, unsalted butter and golden castor sugar. Now for us, is that granulated sugar? Is that light brown sugar or dark brown sugar?
It's your golden granulated sugar.
Golden granulated.
But there's not much difference in it because granulated is just slightly coarser than caster.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's the only difference.
But
so it won't actually taste different.
So we can just use our regular old granulated
100%.
sugar if we want. So we're going to add our unsalted butter, some golden castor sugar or granulated sugar to a mixing bowl. And are we using a stand mixer or a hand mixer, or does it not matter?
It doesn't really matter, but I mean,
Okay.
I would probably use my hand beaters
Okay.
for this when I'm making it.
Why? Why wouldn't you use your stand mixer?
I don't know, just because it's easier. I
Oh,
just
nice.
find I
Yeah.
quite like my hand beaters because it's such an easy recipe. I don't think I'd bother using my stand mixer
Yep.
for it.
So what kind of bowl would you use? Would you use a metal bowl or a big glass or ceramic bowl?
I have a big ceramic bowl.
Yeah, nice. So we're going to grab our big ceramic bowl, like Melanie, and we're going to, and with our hand mixer, we're going to cream together until pale and fluffy the butter and the sugar. Is there a particular speed we're at this point? Like medium?
No, I would start on a slower speed and then speed up a bit and then just keep on going until it's really mixed. I think this is one of the areas that so many people don't put the time into. I think you really have to emphasize that you have to really beat the two things together to make them properly pale and fluffy. With some of my recipes, when I was testing them, I got so worried that people would make them the wrong way and not cream the butter and sugar. And in some of them, I actually said to melt the butter first, because that way I just know I'm guaranteed that they're going to be able to incorporate the butter and the sugar properly. But it was specifically for certain recipes.
Yeah. So that's like 3 to 5 minutes usually, I think, at least in a stand mixer to
Exactly.
get that light and fluffy that you need. Then we're
Yes.
going to add eggs one at a time, and we're going to beat well after each, maybe on medium or medium-low speed with the eggs.
Yes.
And then we're going to add some vanilla paste. Is it okay if we add extract, or do you really prefer paste for this recipe?
I have the vanilla bean paste, which I just always think gives the best flavor. If you're not using an actual vanilla pod, I always think that the vanilla bean paste is the purest flavor that you can add.
Is there a brand you like?
Nielsen Massey.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely favor Nielsen Massey for
Yep,
that.
they have beautiful vanilla paste. And we're going to add some kosher salt or fine sea salt. What kind of salt do you like to use?
I really love sea salt.
Sea salt?
Actually, at your book launch, you gave the Cornish sea salt
Yes.
in the goodie bag. And so it did feel a bit wrong bringing Cornish salt back to England. But I love that salt. That salt's
good.
also really good.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. So we're going to fold in, you call it plain flour, we call it, I think, all-purpose flour. We're going to fold in some all-purpose flour, some baking powder, and mix. When you say folding this in, is this all happening still in our bowl with our hand mixer, or are we now moving over to working with it by hand?
So I would remove the beaters
Okay.
before you put the flour in, and then literally just fold the flour in until you can just not see the white specks anymore.
With like a flexible spatula.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. And you just sort of add the flour, add the baking powder, and then sort of mix them together. Sometimes recipes ask you to like whisk them together in a separate bowl to make sure the leavening distributed, but you are confident. We put it in, we fold it in with our spatula.
It's such a simple recipe, really,
Yeah.
that I just want it to be simple, that people can make it without feeling they need another bowl.
100%. 100%.
Let's keep it simple.
Then we're going to pour half the mixture into a separate bowl, and we're going to add the cocoa paste that we made to it and mix that together, maybe with our same flexible spatula until smooth. So I had 2 questions. Are you eyeballing it? Like, I think this is half the batter, or do you weigh it?
It depends. If I was just making it to enjoy with my family, I would eyeball it.
Yeah.
But if I was doing for something more precise, like if I was, I don't know, if I was taking it to do a demonstration in Harrods, I
Yeah.
might weigh it.
Yeah. That's a good answer. So now we have one bowl that has vanilla batter and one bowl that has chocolate batter. Now we're going to pour layers of each of these batters into our prepared pan, adding one layer of one color on top of the other color, and we'll repeat until we've used up all the batter. Do you have a sense of how many layers you usually do?
Do you know, it just depends. I'll put like a dollop of
Yep.
the mixture in, and then I'll just alternate between adding dollops.
Oh, so it's not like you're doing an entire layer of white and then an
So-
entire layer of chocolate.
Yeah, no, I normally just dollop.
Oh,
I
okay.
dollop.
Okay.
Obviously, there are more techniques. Like in the book, there's a zebra cake, and obviously
Yeah.
that's a very specific technique with dolloping.
Yeah.
But for something like this, I would just, I just think it needs to be fun and not too precise. So I
Yes.
just think a dollop of the vanilla, a dollop of chocolate, and it's all going to look beautiful in the end anyway, because as it rises, those marbles are all going to be there. And
Yeah, I love it. And so now we'll drag a long wooden skewer to kind of
You
drag
could
through
use
the...
a toothpick, or you could you could even use a knife if you don't have a toothpick. But just with a knife, I'd be more gentle. But with a toothpick, just make a few sort of lines through it to make sure that it's
And
nicely mixed.
Sort of just kind of going around the batter in a simple circle, or are we trying to do anything zigzaggy with our wrist as we drag that skewer
Do
through?
you know, I probably would do like a curved.
Yep.
I probably would do a curved line.
Yep. But just
around.
one. We don't keep going.
Just one.
Yep. Love it.
Yes.
I know that we have coated our pan. We prepped our pan with this cocoa powder and cooking spray, or maybe... So if we had used goop, would you also use the cocoa powder?
No,
Okay. And
I would just do the goop.
just do the goop. But since we have the cocoa powder, does that make the vanilla parts of the cake look dark after we bake it? Or is the whole outside brown anyway, so it doesn't really matter?
It's sort of it all merges and it
Yep.
all looks pretty and delicious and
Yum.
chocolatey.
So now we're going to bake for about 50 minutes until maybe that same skewer, inserted it after it's cleaned, is inserted into the cake and comes out clean. Sometimes I like to see like a moist crumb when I'm making a cake. Are you like a clean or go home girl?
Well, I'm actually really fussy about making sure that I don't overbake, because that is the killer of all cakes. So you
Agreed.
have to get that moment just right, that when you take it out of the oven, it is literally at that turning point. So that is quite a skill, and you're not going to have it with your first cake. So you just, as you bake more frequently, you're going to figure that out. And also, I always think you can smell it. Like when you're in the kitchen and you're making lots of cakes, you'll know the smell. When that smell is there and you suddenly go, oh, the cake is ready. That's the moment. And then you have a look and you want it to be just ever so slightly not dry and cooked through. It's a really hard skill to share
Yeah.
with people that aren't baking all of the time. You have to know from your own eye of looking at it.
That's why I think sometimes I will write a recipe for a moist crumb, because I figure I don't mean like wet batter, but if you see a crumb, you probably haven't overbaked it yet. But I agree
Yeah.
with you. The worst is dry cake. The worst
Yes.
is dry cake. So now we're going to pull the Bundt from the oven and we'll let it cool for about 10 minutes. Not longer, right? And not shorter. Yeah.
No, and the way that I think is a really good way of assessing it is when you get your tin out of the oven and it's sitting, and it does also really help to actually put the Bundt tin onto a wire rack so that it really cools all around for those 10 minutes. But then I always think the sign is once you can handle the Bundt tin, that's the time, but not still, it will be hot, but once it's sort of more manageable, that's the time that it needs to come out.
Great. Now we're going to make the milk chocolate glaze while the Bundt is inverted but cooling. We're going to melt some milk chocolate, unsalted butter, and golden syrup. We have golden syrup, but people can use corn syrup. Tell me why we want golden syrup in our glaze.
Because the golden syrup makes it beautiful and shiny.
Yep.
It just adds that little edge to it.
I also feel like it can sometimes give it a little chew almost. Like it just makes the most perfect texture of the glaze too. Plus that shininess.
And it just makes
malleability.
It slightly caramelly as well. It's
so
just,
good.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. But also, I really wanted to use a milk chocolate for the glaze rather than a dark chocolate, because I just feel as though this Bundt is one that all the family can enjoy. And I just know that younger members of the family aren't going to like it if you've thrown a big dark chocolate ganache over it.
I love that.
So I wanted to keep it milky and family friendly.
I'm one of the young people in the family because I love milk chocolate. So I prefer it. So now we're going to place the chocolate and the butter and the golden syrup in a little saucepan, or we can use a heat-proof bowl in the microwave. We will melt the chocolate. Should the Bundt cake be cool by the time we pour the glaze over it?
Yes.
Okay, so the Bundt cake will have cooled. We're going to pour the glaze over it. Is the glaze pretty thick? You know how sometimes when you melt something, you have to wait till it gets a little bit thicker before you use it?
Well, yes. So while it's at its peak heat, then it will be quite runny. So if you just wait just for it to get to that in-between texture, then it will be pourable and it will actually do that lovely sort of drippy thing around the Bundt.
So pretty. So then we will drizzle or drip our glaze over our Bundt. And do you have a technique for that? Do you like to get close to the cake? Do you like to be higher up from the cake with the glaze? Do you like to spoon it on or pour it on?
Do you know, I like to pour it on. I like to put it onto a turntable, actually, so that I can really do it evenly. So in one pour. So as I spin the turntable whilst pouring, so it gets a lovely even drip all down the sides.
And is it better, do you feel like, for the spout to be closer to the cake or farther away from the cake? Or does it not matter?
Oh, do you know, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really noticed a specific difference. I haven't tried different methods. I think I probably tend to go close because I feel it gives me more control.
You let it set, and then you like to decorate with chocolate curls. Do you make those with like a little vegetable peeler?
Yes, or just the back of a knife dragged down the back of a bar of chocolate.
Or, I love that.
Or you can buy them as well, can't you? So
I love
all sorts of things.
I wanted you to tell us about a couple of other Bundts in the book. I love Lamington so much. Tell us about a Lamington Bundt.
Oh, do you know, I love the Lamington. And it's my sister's favorite one in the book. So obviously, being born in Australia, Lamingtons are very Australian.
Can you tell us what a Lamington is for those that don't know?
So Lamington is a sponge cake that's covered in chocolate and coconut. And then sometimes they're made with jam in the center, and sometimes they're not, just depends. It's just different variations of what a classic Lamington is. I'm sure lots of Australians will argue about it. It should definitely have jam. No, it shouldn't have jam. So there are lots of views on it. I think that's definitely one of my most delicious ones in the book.
Is it a coconut flavored Bundt, or it's just a vanilla Bundt coated in chocolate and sprinkled with coconut?
Exactly. It's a vanilla Bundt coated with chocolate. But it's actually really lovely to make, because when you put the chocolate glaze on, it's surprisingly moist. So that really encloses the entire cake. And then with the coconut, it's really delicious. I need to go and make that one again.
Yeah, that sounds so good. And then I think this might be your daughter's favorite, cookies and cream Bundt?
Yes, cookies and cream. Who doesn't love an Oreo? Yes, my daughter absolutely loves this one. We've had this one for so many birthdays, I can't tell you. It's been an absolute favorite. We've had so many birthday cakes. So it's a chocolate Bundt, and then the frosting is cookies. It's made with cream cheese frosting.
Oh my gosh.
It is really delicious, and it's a super moist chocolate cake as well. It's an all-rounder. I mean, it's a great one for a birthday, but it's also quite an everyday bake.
Finally, will you tell us about your Victoria Bundt Witch, based on a Victoria sandwich? And tell us what a Victoria sandwich is for those that don't know.
Well, a Victoria sponge is such a classic British cake that I couldn't possibly not have included one. And so I just wanted to make a play on the words of a Victoria Bundt Witch. It's a classic. It's just a vanilla sponge filled with whipped cream and strawberries, and then dusted with icing sugar. But you know, I can't tell you how many people actually make that one, and they send me the photographs of them, and they're like, I just made your Victoria Bundt Witch. So sometimes the simple cakes really are people's favorites.
Yep.
They're classics for a reason.
So tell us about what your Victoria Bundt Witch is. Is it a vanilla Bundt that you cut in half and fill with whipped cream and jam?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a vanilla Bundt sliced in half across, and then inside I filled it with strawberry jam.
Yum.
Did I fill it with strawberry jam? Raspberry jam.
It doesn't matter. What people can use whatever jam they want.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
it definitely tastes better, even though you put strawberries in it. It does taste better with seedless raspberry jam in it.
Ooh.
So you do the vanilla sponge, slice it across, fill it with raspberry seedless jam, whipped cream, and then strawberries on top.
How come it tastes better with the raspberry jam without seeds?
Do you know, I think it's because the raspberries are more tart. And so the jam just adds a certain tartness to it. And then combined with the fresh raspberry, the fresh strawberries, it just works better.
Oh, I love that.
So once you've filled the center of it, you just put the top of the Bundt back on, dust it with icing sugar. And then, of course, there's the fabulous center of the Bundt that you can then fill with strawberries. So it's a really lovely bake for anything. It's just it's a really lovely summery bake.
Sounds so delicious, Melanie. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Melanie. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessie.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to Nordic Wear for supporting this episode. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. Thank you to CityVox Studio in Manhattan. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!